Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. For those of you who are new to the show or unaware as of yet, you can catch Truth on the Tracks here at ucy.tv every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can access the show's personal page at ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. There is a link, a section for my articles, my recent articles, which are posted up on that page, and there's a chat room there for you as well if you are interested in that. Again, I'm Brandon Turbeville. For those of you who are unfamiliar with me or this show, I am a staff writer for Activist Post as well as the host of Truth on the Tracks, but a regular staff writer for Activist Post. And if you want to keep track of my articles, you can go to activistpost.com and go to the home page and watch them as they appear there. You can also click on the Contributors tab, which will take you to that page. You can find my name and see some of the more recent articles that I've got listed there. Click on my name and it will take you to the page essentially of my archived articles. I'm the author of 4 books if you're interested in that, if you're interested in supporting my work, not only reading the articles but purchasing the books. And you can find those books at thebookpatch.com by searching my name or the names of the books, but you can also find them at falseflagpublications.blogspot.com. If you're interested in just keeping up with my work specifically, then you can go to brandonturbeville.blogspot.com, and that's where I repost all of my articles, all of my interviews, and all of the archived versions of the YouTube versions of this show, Truth on the Tracks. Again, that's brandonturbeville.blogspot.com. For those of you who are listening in now, please stay tuned. Even after the show tonight, I will be a guest on In the Lie Radio with Madison Rupert for the full 2 hours. So for those of you who are listening in to this show, it's your lucky night. You'll be getting 3 hours of Brandon Turbeville, of me. And we're going to be talking about some of the same issues on this show as we will be on In the Lie, and probably getting into some of them in more detail on one show or the other. So it's a good way to spend your time. I recommend the entire 3-hour block if you're able to do that. So we're going to talk about several things, but first I want to draw your attention to some opportunities here. I've talked before on this show about the United Front Against Austerity. I will talk more about it tonight if we have time, but I want to encourage everybody to go to againstausterity.org and check out what's going on over there with the UFAA. This is an opportunity for action. This is an opportunity for concrete political victory, concrete political change. It's time to stop talking. It's time to start doing, and you can start doing by going to againstausterity.org, looking at the program and the set of demands that's been put out by the UFAA, and either joining that organization if you join organizations. If you don't, you can still help out. You don't actually have to join an organization to help out and further the cause. You can find a meetup near you, a group near you, or you can start your own. If you can contact againstausterity.org or contact the UFAA and try and start your own group and see what you can do in that regard. Again, the programs are up there, the domestic policy, the foreign policy, the signature demands. All of that is on the website. Check those out. I'll talk more about that later on in the show. But also, in regards to the latest anti-gun agenda that's been increasing ever since the Newtown shootings, there's a new organization here in South Carolina. It's Palmetto Gun Rights, and you can find them on Facebook. Again, their name is Palmetto Gun Rights. Find them, like that page. They are, at least I don't know anything about the group, the organization personally. I don't know anyone in the organization, but from reading their website, the platform essentially for Palmetto gun rights is no compromise on the Second Amendment, and that's exactly the perspective that we should take. No compromise, no gun control at all, full Second Amendment rights for every American citizen. And I don't know the position of the Palmetto Gun Rights Organization, but that includes felons. That includes people who've served time in prison and are now out. If these people are a danger to society, they shouldn't be out, and that's a fault of the judicial system and the court system. It's not the fault of the Second Amendment. So, full gun rights, Second Amendment rights for all Americans. Please go check out Palmetto Gun Rights on Facebook, but also check out their website at palmettogunrights.org. Again, that's palmettogunrights.org. It's imperative that we, as I've mentioned on a fireside chat last week when I talked with Lance White, it's imperative that we start to form coalitions, and it's imperative that we start to link together and provide a united front, even though we retain our independence and our individuality as groups and individuals in the process. Again, I'll talk more about that coming up. I've got a couple things to do here to go through in regards to some of the articles that I've been writing lately and been paying attention to lately, and in a way we're going to work backwards to some degree. Actually, we're going to be all over the place with these. But I want to draw your attention to an article that I've written for Activist Post, and we'll put this up under the YouTube video of the archive version of this show, and it's entitled, Belgian Environmental Study Corroborates Existence and Effects of Weather Modification. And I'll jump into the article here. It's more proof of the chemtrail situation. Even as the mainstream media and a television-obsessed American public refuse to admit the existence of chemtrails and government-sponsored weather modification programs, the evidence continues to mount with ever-increasing speed that not only do these programs exist, but they are also effective and widespread. In addition to the recent study published in Environmental Research Letters entitled Cost Analysis of Stratospheric Albedo Modification Delivery Systems, where the cost of delivering tons of aerosols into the stratosphere were examined in terms of a variety of different means, a 2010 study undertaken on behalf of the Belfort Group, a Belgian environmental watchdog organization, also corroborates much of the information compiled by citizens and activists the world over regarding the existence of chemtrails and stratospheric weather modification programs. The study, entitled Contrail Science, Its Impact on Climate and Weather Manipulation Programs Conducted by the United States and Its Allies, seeks to highlight, quote, the specific problems associated with contrails emitted by aircraft, the manipulation for defense purposes of some of these trails by the United States government, and the subsequent effect on quality of life, end quote. Making a distinction between four different types of man-made clouds, and I have clouds in quotes here. There's contrails, chemtrails, distrails, the tunnel produced when a plane passes through a stable cloud, and wingtip vortices, the vortex caused by planes flying at high speed. The study focuses on contrails and chemtrails. Thus, the report defines chemtrails by stating, quote, chemtrail is the contraction of chemical trail and is used by some sources to denote intentional spraying by airplanes for military or political purposes, and that may be harmful to public health. A more general name is aviation smog, which combines contrails, distrails, and chemtrails. Authors referring to chemtrails claim that this phenomena is much more persistent than contrails, and when sprayed in a grid, it is able to cover vast areas. End quote. No, I'm sorry, not end quote. We're continuing with the quote from the study. Although officially denied by government sources, many countries perform tests for cloud seeding to either generate precipitation where it was needed or to prevent precipitation where it was unwanted. At this moment, only the Russian and Chinese governments admit that they use particular matter in order to manipulate weather patterns. End quote. Divided evenly between the analysis of the effects of contrails and chemtrails, the Belfort study details some interesting findings regarding the effects on both the weather and human health by traditional contrails in addition to the much more dangerous chemtrails. According to the study, in regards to the average daily temperature and the overall cloud cover generated by contrails on a regular basis, a survey of the average diurnal temperature range, the DTR, was conducted during the rare period that commercial air traffic was grounded on and in the days after September 11th, 2001. Of course, that's with the exception of the Saudi royals who were flying back and forth across the country because they were friends with the Bushes. But I don't mention that in the article. It was subsequently determined that a temperature increase of about 10 degrees Celsius occurred during that period in comparison with the normal values. The report states, quote, "The increase is larger than during the 11th to 14th September period for the previous 30 years, giving ammunition to critics who state that weather conditions at this specific period were very extraordinary and no scientifically based conclusions could be taken. However, even more surprising is the fact that the 11th to 14th September increase in DTR was more than twice the national average for regions in the United States where contrail coverage has previously reported to have been the most abundant, such as the Midwest, Northeast, and Northwest regions." End quote. Furthermore, the report suggests that after the resumption of normal air traffic, there was a temperature drop of 0.8 degrees Celsius, which it then uses to justify claims that contrails and air traffic do affect climate. The report also states that cirrus clouds, which are similar to the type of cloud formations caused by chemtrail spraying, has a significant effect on both climate and temperature. It reads, quote, "The climate of the Earth results from an energy balance between absorbed sunlight and radiative losses of heat from Earth and its atmosphere to space. Clouds are an important modulator in this balance. Clouds reflect sunlight back towards space, which reduce the solar energy available to the Earth, also called the albedo effect. Clouds also reduce radiative heat losses to space, the greenhouse effect. Which of these two opposing processes dominates depends on how many parameters include cloud particle composition, cloud structure, cloud cover, and cloud location. Changes to only one of these parameters can have significant implications for climate. The greenhouse effect is weak for low-altitude clouds, so their albedo effect dominates it and they cool the Earth's climate. In contrast, cold high-altitude cirrus clouds may either cool or warm the climate. This will prove to be a key element whether to determine if weather modification is being conducted on the planet in order to reduce global warming. Cirrus clouds thus have a strong greenhouse effect, which may outweigh their albedo effect losses. As the importance of both opposing effects depends critically on little understood properties, theoretical calculations of the climatic effects of cirrus are controversial. The main uncertainty stems from a current inability to calculate the scattering of sunlight in cirrus clouds, since they contain a multitude of ice crystal shapes and sizes, and are irregular in structure. Even more, Stefan Kinn of the NASA Ames Research Center states clearly that the cirrus albedo effect is severely underestimated by calculations. This proves that knowledge in this field of science is quite limited, and extensive research is mandatory in order to fully understand the impact of cirrus clouds on climate. In this respect, it is noteworthy that evidence of thin cirrus clouds in the stratosphere has already been established." End quote. With this in mind, the study attributes a substantial amount of climate, environmental, and health risks to the existence of basic contrails, a natural result of regular air traffic. However, it should also be noted that the Belfort report seems to present an apparent confusion in regards to its own terminology, such as contrails versus chemtrails. This is because the term contrails is used in some circumstances as meaning the traditional ice trail produced by normal air traffic, and in other circumstances as meaning the typical chemtrail. For this reason, this writer suggested interpreting the term contrails as persistent contrails, since it is the lack of dissipation that would necessarily produce any cloud creation that one usually associates with chemtrails, as well as the concerns in relation to precipitation, pollution, and large-scale environmental and health risks. Nevertheless, in regards to precipitation, the Belfort report summarizes conclusions reached by Professor D. Rosenfeld of the Institute of Earth Sciences at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Israel. The report states, quote, "The conclusion of the study group, Professor Rosenfeld's study group, is as follows. Both air pollution, particularly with aerosols, can both increase or decrease rainfall, and can be true, depending on local environmental conditions. The amount of aerosols is the critical factor controlling how the energy is distributed in the atmosphere. According to this survey, they follow the energy flow through the atmosphere and the way it is influenced by aerosols and other airborne particles. On this planet, there is indeed an interaction of energy between the different cells within the troposphere in order to obtain a life-sustaining temperature, 15 degrees Celsius in the international standard atmosphere at sea level. Aerosols act twofold. On one hand, they act like a sunscreen, reducing the amount of energy reaching the ground. Accordingly, less water evaporates and the air mass at ground level stays cooler and drier, with a reduced tendency to rise and form clouds. Aerosols act as a sunscreen with the subsequent reduction of energy reaching the ground. Some sources refer to this phenomenon as global dimming. End quote. Yet, according to the Belfort report, there are other variables regarding the connection between aerosols and man-made incidental precipitation, namely the amount of particulate matter such as aerosols that act as nuclei for condensation. As the Belfort report states, quote, if there is a surplus of these condensation nuclei as a result of natural activities such as volcan eruption or men's intervention such as industrial pollution, contrails, the droplets never reach the critical mass needed to fall to Earth as precipitation because there is just not enough water to share between all the aerosol particles. Furthermore, with a rising number of droplets, their overall surface increases, which in turn increases the amount of sunlight reflected back to space with subsequent cooling and drying of the Earth. End quote. Going further, the Belfort report cites a separate study by Professor Rosenberg, where it summarizes his findings by writing, quote, in a nutshell, the study of Professor Rosenberg shows the following. With rising pollution, the amount of precipitation at first rises, then maxes out, and finally falls off sharply at very high aerosol concentrations. Of even more interest is his conclusion, and this is Professor Rosenberg writing. The practical result is that in relatively clean air, adding aerosols up to the amount that releases the maximum of available energy increases precipitation. Beyond that point, increasing the aerosol load even further lessens precipitation. End quote. Thus, aerosol spraying can affect the climate and environment by both increasing or decreasing precipitation, and or inversely, causing dehydration as well. So in other words, they can make it go either way they want, depending on the amount of aerosols that they put in the air, and probably the type of aerosol spray as well. Professor Rosenberg further states that, quote, the determination of this issue is one with significant consequences in an era of climate change and especially in areas suffering from man-made pollution and water shortages, including Israel, end quote. The latter part of this statement should be very alarming to citizens of all nations, considering the fact that fresh drinking water is increasingly becoming a highly valued asset in modern times. Interestingly enough, the Belfort report also mentions 3 areas of man-made cirrus cloud ramifications that have been understudied as more of a political reticence than scientific, but that might very well play a part in the changing of the climate. It states, quote, the obvious side effects from the formation of contrails is the impact on astronomy. One has seldom a clear sky available for observation in areas with dense air traffic. With changing cloud cover and subsequent temperature drop in the upper layer of the troposphere, hurricane activity may be increased as a result of the released instability. It is noteworthy that storms and major floods have more than tripled since 1981. No apparent relationship between aircraft engine emissions, aerosols, contrails, and hurricane activity has been established yet on a scientific basis. It is accepted that knowledge on man-made cirrus clouds is relatively poor and that study of impact of contrails on the stratosphere is only in its initial phases. However, one can assume that it might have an impact on higher layers and the ozone layer. Ozone depletion does not only occur as a result of industrial activity, but also due to multiple nuclear tests conducted in the 20th century. End quote. Considering the wide range of components necessary to conduct an aerosol spraying campaign, for whatever purposes, there are at least 3 requirements that must be met in order to conduct such a campaign successfully, according to the Belfort report. They are, quote, 1. Development of a reliable matrix of aerosol ingredients versus field conditions. 2. Engineering of an efficient, reliable, but low-cost system in order to seed the atmosphere. 3. Sponsorship through government agencies with a far-reaching commitment of captains of industry. End quote. The Belfort Group thus rightly concludes that all these elements were in place at the time of the publication of the report in 2010, except for the reliability factor. However, the report goes on to summarize an extensive history of geoengineering projects since the mid-20th century. Thus, while the report itself does not suggest that the reliability factor exists, the fact that so many years of tests and attempts at geoengineering does provide the average reader with plenty of reasons to believe that the reliability factor does in fact exist. Since most projects known to the general public are far behind the true level of sophistication of government military programs, one would likely be safe in the assumption that the chemtrail geoengineering programs are much more advanced than even the Belfort Group is aware of. And I highly recommend that you go back and find my article and click on the link to the Belfort Group study, which is, again, Contrail Science, its impact on climate and weather manipulation programs conducted by the United States and its allies. The link is in the article. And take a look at the history that they cite of geoengineering projects that have gone on in the United States alone, and see how far it goes back and see how sophisticated it has become on the official basis that we know about. And of course, we know if we know about any of these programs, then the program itself is vastly superior and vastly more advanced than anything that we could conceive of. I would say some people have estimated that it's probably 50 to 60 years ahead of what we know as our technological limits. I would go further. I would say 100 years in advance of our technological limits. So back to the article. In the end, and after approximately 70 pages of documentation, the Belfort Group concludes the following, quote, Point 1. Manipulation of climate through modification of cirrus clouds is neither a hoax nor a conspiracy theory, but currently the best option in geoengineering considered by decision makers to counter global warming. The impact of production on artificial cirrus clouds of artificial cirrus clouds on temperature and precipitation patterns is supported by adequate hard scientific evidence. 2. The ambition of the United States is to control the weather by the year 2025, both for civil and military purposes, offensive and defensive strategies. This research paper contains a proven track record to support that statement. 3. The technology to organize spraying actions on a global scale is widely available. Both civil and military aviation is used for that purpose. The mix containing oxides of metals and chemical components can either be dispersed through special designed pods or directly incorporated into the jet fuel. This research paper is well documented in this respect. 4. Since the patents are owned by the main defense contractor for the U.S. Armed Forces, Raytheon, or the U.S. Department of Defense itself, and given the history record, it is obvious that current climate manipulation programs are organized and directed by the United States government. 5. The spraying actions in Europe are only possible with prior approval and intense coordination of top government level and industry on executive level. The general public is intentionally kept unaware of the existence of such projects. 6. Although the spraying actions may be considered legal, these actions may have a potential detrimental effect on health. There is sufficient scientific evidence available in this research paper to support this thesis. End quote. The report also presents 4 sets of recommendations in going forward regarding chemtrails, or as the report chooses to classify them, man-made contrails. And these are the recommendations. Quote, A. Artificial cirrus clouds should be classified as a separate cloud genus by the WMO. Additional scientific research with the effects on nature and public health on this subject should be considered. Results, whatever the outcome, should be made public. B. It is unacceptable that the AWACS aircraft fleet under NATO operates under Luxembourg registrations without complying with civil aviation regulations. This is a flagrant violation of the law, and this should be corrected in the near future. Given the very unfavorable engine emission ratios of this aircraft, retrofitting of these engines should be considered as soon as practical. C. When considering a legal case, it is better to sue an industrial group, such as Raytheon, rather than a government agency. It is clear for us that the responsibility of Raytheon in this respect is far-reaching, with the creation of a monopoly in climate modeling or weather as a geoengineering or military instrument. If possible, an international ban should be placed on such weapons. D. Although the existence of weather modification projects have been illustrated in an adequate way in this research paper, it is now the duty of a serious politician on any level to make inquiries to the government for public release of these spraying schemes through aviation. It is mandatory that such a statement should include the reason why such operations are conducted. It is not an option to hide behind the motive of national security." End quote. Unfortunately, with the exception of an expanded awareness of chemtrails or persistent man-made contrails amongst the general public, the recommendations made by the Belfort Group have gone completely ignored by those in government, science, academia, and the mainstream media ever since its publication. Regardless, the Belfort Group's report stands as yet one more documented piece of the puzzle regarding the incessant spraying campaigns now taking place worldwide on a daily basis. While immediate action is not to be expected at this time, the Belfort Group's report and all other available resources must be used by those of us who are aware of the chemtrail spraying campaigns to educate those of us who are not. Now, keep in mind this Belfort study was published in 2010, and I did an article recently regarding another study which I mentioned at the beginning of this article, which was Cost Analysis of Stratospheric Albedo Modification Delivery Systems. And this was undertaken by three different researchers from three different organizations. And they cite several other studies regarding scientific studies that were done regarding the cost of aerosol spraying campaigns. And what's interesting is the manner in which this environmental research letter study goes about its business, its analysis of the cost of the aerosol spraying campaigns, where they look at various different variables like airships versus airplanes versus guns, rocket-powered gliders, suspended space platforms, and slurry pipes, and they determined that at this point traditional aircraft is the cheapest manner in which aerosol sprays can be delivered to the stratosphere. And of course, they conclude that it's easier to spray all this material in the tropical tropopause for easier spread, cheaper spread. You get more bang for your buck if you do that way. We're going to have to take a break right now for station identification. We'll be right back on the other side.
Brink. We are on the brink, but of what? No one knows. It depends on the reference frame that you're looking at it from. On the Brink with Jeff Weverson.
We have been nuked. Did you know that? Check out Nuked Radio on ucy.tv Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Radchick and Jules. Stay safe, everyone.
ucy.tv. The future is in your hands.
I'm Brandon Turbeville, staff writer for ActivistPost.com. You can catch Truth on the Tracks every Monday night at 9 p.m. and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on ucy.tv.
I'm Madison Rupert, the host of End the Lie Radio here on UCY.TV every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern. Tune in every Monday here on UCY.TV.
You're listening to UCY.TV. Real news, real people.
This is Josh from Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. You can catch me 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Fridays, and catch all the great hosts here on UCY.TV.
Catch Before the First Cup with Jules, Monday through Friday, 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at UCY.TV/BTFC.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brandon Turbeville. You're listening to Truth on the Tracks here on UCY.TV. For those of you who just joined us, we were talking about the Belgian environmental study that came out of the Belfort group. It's entitled Contrail Science, Its Impact on Climate and Weather Manipulation Programs Conducted by the United States and Its Allies. And you can get to that by searching the title, or you can just do the easy thing and search the title for my article, which is almost as long, unfortunately, but it's a Belgian environmental study corroborates existence and effects of weather modification, which you can find at activistpost.com. And you can pull all the studies that I've discussed in the first half of this show. You can pull them up and take a look at them at your convenience. Now, again, for those of you who have just tuned in, I'm going to be appearing tonight on In the Lie Radio with Madison Rupert, which comes on at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right after this show. So if you're listening to this show, you should stick around and listen to 2 more hours of myself speak with Madison Rupert of In the Lie Radio. It's a great show, and we have a lot to talk about, a lot of things we're going to go through. Also, just to remind you to go to palmettogunrights.org. Check out that website. Go to Palmetto Gun Rights on Facebook. Like their page and offer your support there. It's an organization that just popped up here in South Carolina that is supportive of the Second Amendment. It's a gun rights group. Their platform on the website, at least, says no compromise on the Second Amendment, and I could not agree more. No compromise on the Second Amendment, no compromise on any of our amendments, no compromise on our rights, civil rights, constitutional rights, human rights, no compromise on rights at all. Compromise is the only way to ensure that everybody loses, and I am tired of losing. So, before I get into that subject, let me bring to your attention, I have an article up on Activist Post, and it's entitled Illinois Total Gun Ban Legislation to be Submitted, Confiscation to Follow. Now, by the time you're listening to this, you know what's been going on with it, but I'm going to read the article just so you can get an idea of what the bill is about. And to tell you, to bear in mind as I read this, the bill did pass out of the Senate committee, so it's going to the full Senate in Illinois. So here's the article. The Illinois State Rifle Association is claiming that it has learned from a credible source that Illinois State Senate President John Cullerton plans to introduce an assault weapons ban on Wednesday, January 2nd, during the course of the lame duck session. Of course, he did do that. Cullerton's apparent strategy is to ram the bill through the Illinois State Congress during the lame duck and provide the passed version to Governor Quinn by Friday for signing. Quinn is, of course, a notorious gun grabber, and he is. If the bill passes according to the ISRA, quote, nearly every gun you currently own will be banned and will be subject to confiscation by the Illinois State Police, end quote. The ISRA states, quote, based on what we know about Cullerton's bill, firearms that would be banned include all semi-automatic rifles, pistols, and shotguns. Pump-action shotguns would be banned as well. This would be a very comprehensive ban that would include not only so-called assault weapons, but also such classics as M1 Garands and 1911-based pistols. There would be no exemptions and no grandfathering. You would have a very short window to turn in your guns to the state police to avoid prosecution, end quote. According to the Truth About Guns, there will actually be 2 bills, quote, one for semi-automatic rifles, lever guns, shotguns, and handguns with certain features, such as threaded barrels, and one for ammunition magazine capacity, end quote. The ISRA has posted 5 points on what you need to do to save your guns, and they are as follows. 1, the quote from the website, 1, beginning Wednesday, call your state senator and politely tell him or her that you are a law-abiding firearm owner and that you strongly oppose Cullerton's gun ban. Also, be sure to call your state representative as well and politely deliver the same message. If you do not know your state representative, please call the Illinois State Board of Elections at 217-782-4141. Now, I'm just going to say, if you can find out who these people are online, relatively easy. Well, I'll take that back. You can find out who they are online, and you should definitely get in contact with them. 2, forward this alert to all your gun-owning friends and family members. Be sure to tell them to call for their senators and representatives as well. 3, post this alert to any and all internet bulletin boards and blogs to which you belong. 4, join or renew your membership in the ISRA. Encourage your friends and family to join us as well. And then there's 5, make a generous donation. You can access that if you want. Now back to the article. In the wake of the Newtown school shooting, the anti-gun agenda will undoubtedly be pressed harder and harder into concrete actions against the Second Amendment. The attacks on gun ownership will likely be coming from all sides in the coming months. Thus, while one may attempt to achieve as many victories for the Second Amendment as possible through the legislative and political process, it should always be remembered that there should be no compromise and no debate when it comes to our basic rights. You can access that article, as I said earlier. That law, that bill, did get submitted to the Illinois State Senate, and it did make it out of committee, so it's going to the full Senate. Do not sit around and believe foolishly that this bill will not pass. This kind of thing will pass so long as you sit idly by. Sometimes you don't even have to sit idly by, and it still passes. So we'll see how far this goes. But one thing I can encourage people to do, whether it passes or not, do not give up your guns. Do not submit to gun confiscation. You do not have a duty to comply with these type of laws, and there comes a point where people are going to have to resist. We're going to have to draw a line in the sand, and when it gets crossed, we're going to have to stop backing up and drawing new lines, because those lines only get crossed themselves. Now, before I read that article, I said that I'm tired of losing. And I am tired of losing. I'm tired of being abused by this system, and I'm tired of, to use the cliche, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So, on December the 21st of 2012, my last article of 2012, I wrote, "It's time for the aware to take action." Now, I tried my best to pimp this article as many places as I could. So if you've read it, good. If you haven't, then please, 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 go read it. It's time for the aware to take action. And I'm going to read this article in the time here that we have left in the second segment. Again, I'll be on In the Live Radio with Madison Rupert, where we're going to be talking about this very issue as well. So I'm going to jump into the article here, and hopefully we'll have more time to discuss it after I'm finished reading it. For anyone who is even passively aware of current events and the condition of humanity across the globe, it is abundantly clear that both the nation and the world as a whole are moving further and further into a state of oppression and total lockdown. From the traditional macro events which are taking place at the international and global levels, to the micro events, or seemingly micro, that are taking place at the national, state, and local arenas, the opportunity for optimism in the outcome of the decisions made seems to be few and far between. Indeed, in order to find areas where battles are won by those on the ground fighting against an encroaching police state, further pollution of the environment, war, proliferation of GMOs, or related causes, one must search on average 100 times harder than would otherwise be necessary to locate the news of another defeat. The headlines from both the mainstream and alternative media outlets suggest only greater accomplishments of the system, the New World Order, Anglo-American establishment, shadow world government, etc., whatever you want to call it, with each passing day. Obviously, the mainstream media is intent and focused on the further brainwashing and propagandizing of the world's people, blatantly promoting their enslavement for those who are aware of the methods used, further implanting the accepted opinions of the future in the minds of the masses who are not. The constant replay of a laundry list of possible catastrophes, those that have occurred and those that might occur, serve to wrap the human mind in a cloak of continual panic and subconscious desire to protect oneself by any means necessary. That method of protection, of course, is readily served up by the mainstream media under the guise of sacrificing freedom for security, which the victims of the propaganda continue to fall for on an ever-increasing scale. Whether the initial incident is 9/11, mass shootings, flu outbreaks, financial calamity, the unchanging trend is fear, and the unchanging solution is the sacrifice of basic human rights under the guise that government, its agents or agencies, will act as the protectors. It has been the case ever since 9/11, most notably, that the population has been subjected to a campaign of terror by their governments, corporations, experts, and financiers. Fear is the order of the day. An entire generation of humanity has been reduced to a terrified and ignorant mass of beggars, pleading with what they see as authorities to protect them from the very dangers the oligarchy themselves have visited upon them. This constant state of fear allows those few in positions of real power to control the many by virtue of the reptilian brain, which at all times seeks safety, protection, and survival. If a population has been propagandized to believe in an enemy, real or imagined, and then subjected to terror under the aegis of that enemy, then the minds of the many are already moles in the hands of the few. A constant state of fear clouds clear judgment. It does not allow for rational responses, only irrational reactions. A continual state of fear wrecks the body, the immune system, and the quality of life experienced by those embroiled in the condition. In the end, the fear that has wrecked the body will only produce more fear with the inevitable illness that results. Lastly, according to some, fear operates at a much lower vibration than that of love, joy, and contentment. Thus, an individual caught in a cycle of fear is entirely incapable of achieving any higher level of consciousness that may allow them to combat the control system on a spiritual or energetic level. The alternative media, however, which has expanded exponentially in recent years, has done yeoman's service in combating much of the propaganda issued from their corporate counterparts. Whether the issue be one of those mentioned above or some other aspect of our society, the alternative media is filling a void left by the corporate mainstream media. There is no question that the alternative media is providing a vital service for any movement or revolution that is to take place in the United States or any other nation. However, for those of us actively involved in the alternative media and this movement that seeks to establish a more peaceful, equitable, and free world for ourselves and our progeny, it is important that we do not become that which we fight against. It is more important that we do not become tools of the system ourselves and contribute to establishing a constant state of fear for those who access alternative media outlets for the information, or even for those of us who research, report, and comment upon it. This is by no means a suggestion to cease reporting or researching unpleasant topics. On the contrary, we must continue to unearth and shed light on nefarious secrecy whenever possible. We must continue to report the day-to-day events with a lens undiluted by government and corporate money or by any agenda other than that of basic humanity and freedom. We must continue to acknowledge and sound the alarm over current events that others may be unaware of or otherwise disinformed about. However, it is now necessary that we do more than simply report on the recently unveiled methods of enslavement that we face, along with an eye as to how much worse our plight will be tomorrow. We cannot continue to terrorize ourselves into a state of hysteria, to become a sizable portion of society whose eyes are now opened, but only so that we can see our inevitable destruction. I do not believe our destruction is inevitable. As a result, I demand to see a way forward, not new and creative ways to solidify the fact that I am a slave. The alternative media and the movement, for lack of a better term, have become experts at documenting the daily disillusion of our rights. We have become skilled artisans in the area of constructing a journal of our plight. Unfortunately, it is also true that in our current state, the best we can hope for may be that in the distant future, some curious observer, if curiosity still exists, may come into contact with our work and puzzle at the curious writings that have come into his possession. But this is no future for us, and it is no future for the ones who discover the remnants of a past which he can no longer relate to. Unfortunately, in becoming experts at journal keeping during the collapse and restructuring of human civilization, the alternative media and the modern revolutionary have seemingly become content to merely report the unfolding history as opposed to actively taking part in it. Thankfully, there are those involved in both the alternative media and the movement in general who are not willing to hear solutions, who are not only willing to hear solutions, but are both willing and capable of producing them. Still, scarcely are those voices raised before catcalls of pessimism are hurled back in their directions. Shouts of "that will never happen," but how do we get to that point? Or we don't have the numbers, inevitably drown out those that are at least attempting to develop a plan to change the course of the nation and the earth. Obviously, petty squabbles over political pedigree are bound to come into play, with tendencies left over from past experiences, further alienating activists and researchers from one another. Yet for all the bickering back and forth, the fact is that numbers alone will not bring change if they are merely numbers in their own right. As Webster Tarpley has stated on numerous occasions, opinions alone count for nothing. What matters is coordinated political action. Simple education and outreach is not enough. If we can reach the majority of the public, we have accomplished a great feat. However, if all we have accomplished is educating them in regards to their fate, with no coordinated effort to reverse the course of society, then we have only wasted our energy and made our descent into abject slavery that much more painful a process. With this in mind, it is important to understand that there can be no coordinated action based on a series of complaints. Every mass movement needs a program, a set of demands. It is in no way prudent to take to the streets with a series of complaints and no programmatic solution of how to address these complaints. To the uninformed masses, the questions loom like an albatross. What are you going to do if you seize power? It is incumbent upon those of us involved in redirecting this system to answer that question clearly with a program of our own. After all, as Frederick Douglass once stated, power concedes nothing without a demand. Thus, it is high time to put our personal differences aside, as well as our philosophical and political ideologies, and begin to form a coalition around a set of demands that both appeals to the American people and articulates a program that will return the basic civil liberties afforded to every American in the United States Constitution, as well as by the basic human rights afforded to every human being by the Creator, whatever one believes it to be, by virtue of being born. We must begin to build a coalition of like-minded individuals and organizations, but also of those people and organizations that are further afield, in order to advance our own political agenda. A united front must be constructed where the individuals and organizations retain their individuality and independence, but one in which they have come together on one common banner, with the ability to unite their forces for a common purpose. Thankfully, this model has already begun to appear in at least 2 locations across the world with at least some degree of success. The first, the Syriza Party of Greece, represents a grouping of political parties, activist organizations, unions, and other arrangements that alone counted for nothing in terms of political clout. When united under a common front, the Syriza Party, these organizations were able to accumulate over 40% of the vote in the first election campaign. Syriza exhibited several necessary ingredients to the formation of a successful coalition, most notably that of a program that spelled out the steps and requirements to end austerity measures in Greece and repair the damage done to the Greek economy by the banker-dominated government at home and the one in Brussels. Syriza exhibited expert leadership with the presidential candidate Alexis Tsipras in front and center of its electoral and public relations campaign. It also demonstrated the ability to reach across national boundaries to connect with similar coalitions and organizations outside of Greece for potential international support. The fact that Syriza has enjoyed so much success early on in Greek elections not only provides us with a much-needed hope regarding our own situation, but also provides us with the ability to analyze which models work and which models do not, along with the ability to analyze how this degree of success was accomplished. Fortunately, there are some who have learned the lessons of Syriza here in the United States, and as a result, a coalition has been organized and developed within our borders. Based on the Syriza model, the United Front Against Austerity, the UFAA, has itself constructed a set of demands and a program of political solutions. The UFAA is currently working to agitate alongside a variety of organizations that have themselves been splintered by stealthy politics and propaganda on the part of the oligarchy. The UFAA is attempting to build its own base and circle of influence. The UFAA's program is one that stands against austerity measures and the cutting and gutting of the social safety net. It is one which exhibits the best aspects of the New Deal while drastically improving upon the economic rejuvenation features of that historical program. The program also demands Medicare for all, the demilitarization of police, the restoration of civil liberties to the American people, an end to foreign wars, and a more enlightened approach to health and medicine that includes holistic and alternative methods. However, the UFAA, as anyone building a coalition of this nature should be, is aware that a truly successful political mobilization of the American people can only be structured around the economic issues that they face, not false flag attacks, wars, education, the environment, or any other topic of concern, as important as they may be. Coalitions centered around false flags face the uphill battle of massive and in-depth education efforts before any mobilization is possible. Anti-war, education, and environmentally based coalitions generally rely on only a quarter of the potential support due to the disassociation and apathy experienced and expressed by most of the populace toward these concerns, at least in terms of political participation. Economic concerns, however, are the one issue that not only affects every single American, but it is the one issue that most Americans perceive as affecting them. For this reason, any coalition that wishes to attract broad support must use economic solutions to build itself up and ride a wave of popular support into power. In addition, it is important to understand that Austrian school economics of laissez-faire capitalism, deregulation of the banking and finance industry, and the cutting and gutting of social safety net programs cannot and should not be used to build such a coalition. Not only are the moral implications disastrous for everyone except the very wealthy, such programs are not likely to win the support of the American people, many of whom may actually rely on one or more of these programs as a last line of defense against homelessness, hunger, or extreme poverty. Lastly, the forming of a true coalition must be undertaken with much more than mere elections in mind. It is a fact that any and all social and political movements in the United States are vastly stronger without the Republican and Democratic parties, as the failure of the Union protests in Wisconsin have illustrated. Thus, while elections will inevitably enter into the picture, they must also inevitably exclude the two major parties. The most pressing matter facing any coalition, like the United Front Against Austerity, is a forcing of the issues into the mainstream and the seizing of power by the coalition and the vacuum that will ensue. The method of the coalition must be the general strike. If the coalition merely becomes a lobbying group for the two major parties, then the effort is wasted. If it becomes merely another third party, the effort is equally useless. However, if the coalition is able to become a force within its own right, a part and an organization which can command the workers into the streets, then the path toward victory is real and attainable. As Barrio Savio once said, quote, "There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels and upon the levers and upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all." The United States now finds itself in a crisis. It is true that the crisis exists on multiple levels, and it is true that we are surrounded by an American population that seems oblivious to it. However, as Rahm Emanuel, the former Obama chief of staff and current mayor of Chicago, has stated, you never want a serious crisis to go to waste. But the question to be asked is, why should the oligarchs be the only one to take advantage of a crisis? If Rahm Emanuel can seize the fear and emotions surrounding a crisis, then why can a coordinated coalition of organizations and individuals not do the same? If the 33rd degree of Freemasonry can profess to create an order out of chaos, order ab chao, then why can we not do the same where that chaos already exists? in the end, we have a very small window of opportunity opening up before us. We also have some hard choices to make. We can continue to document our own destruction, or we can mount a resistance to it. We can continue to make a detailed journal of the dissolution of our way of life, or we can organize in its defense. The time for talking has passed. It is now time for action. So I encourage every single person listening to this broadcast to go to activistpost.com and find that article, pull it up. It's time for the aware to take action. Spread this article around far and wide to your friends, awake, not awake, all the same. To all the organizations that you are a part of or that you're aware of, send this article out. Try to make it go viral, because what people need to understand is that it's time to stop talking like lab rats. I heard Alan Watt describe it once as the alternative media as being like lab rats who are part of an experiment. And every day the rats wake up and they form a circle and they form a group and they sit around and talk to one another and they say, what do you think the scientists are going to do to us today? Do you think they're going to poke needles in our brains? Do you think they're going to force feed us? Do you think they're going to withhold food? Maybe they're going to drown us. What are they going to do? And then all the rats sit around and they talk about what they've had done to them before, and what do they think will happen, what do they think is coming in the future, what's happening right now, and they uncover these things that are being done to them now. But there's never any discussion of how to get out of the cage and how to get out of the experiment. Well, that's what the alternative media a lot of times have become. We sit around and we freak each other out. We should definitely keep reporting this, but we turn around and we say, look what's happening. Oh my God, vaccines. Oh my God, chemtrails. Oh my God, World War III. Oh my God. But we never actually sit down and try to figure out how to get out of this situation. And as I detail in the article, one of the first steps, okay, you recognize that you're in a crisis. Now, how do you get out of it? You make demands. You've got to have the demands. Once you have something to demand, then you can go into battle. And you can't sit around waiting on the knight on the white horse to come around and save you, because he's not coming. This is up to us. And as Donald Rumsfeld once said, you don't go into battle with the army that you want. You go into battle with the army that you have. So things aren't perfect. We don't have the numbers. We don't have all the organization, the infrastructure. We certainly don't have the money. But what we do have is what we're going to have to use, and we're going to have to take full advantage of it. Build the coalitions. The United Front Against Austerity is there. Involve yourself with this group so long as it remains legitimate. But the building of coalitions does not have to stop with the United Front Against Austerity at the national level. If you have a group, whether it's anti-vaccine, anti-fluoride, chemtrail awareness, then form a set of demands that you can try and rally around. A set of demands which says that you stand for something, not just against something. I'm not just against vaccines. I'm for removing them from being placed on some sort of proto-mandatory list for school enrollment. I'm not anti-fluoride. I'm pro-clean water, right? And get these demands. This is not just a semantic issue. We're going to have to carry this over to the next week probably. But this is not just a semantics issue. Form your coalition, make your demands, and reach out to other groups and other individuals that agree with you and the ones that don't. Form those coalitions and take action. It's time to stop being slaves. It's time to start being free people. At the very least, it's time to fight like free people and like people who care about their freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Truth on the Tracks. You can catch us Monday night, Friday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned in, and I will be on In the Lie Radio with Madison Rupert coming up. Thanks for listening.